Mosky was in the middle of drying his laundry, hands ice cold from handling the wet clothes, when the phone on the desk suddenly rang. He hung his towel on the clothes horse, and hurried over to the phone. Okay, yeah, you need to answer that phone because it'll annoy the shit out of me. Stella. Muskie recognized the voice, so he was sure the caller hadn't dialed the place by accident. Huh? For a moment, Muskie was taken aback that she continued, even after learning he wasn't the one she'd been hoping to reach. Still, Muskie decided to go on, figuring he could pass her message to Reiji later. Muskie recalled the giant painting that was currently on display at the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum. You know, honestly, I felt like there was a reason that when they were last there, Reiji, when he went there with Toji, or no, I think it was the last time he talked to Stella, he pointed out, like, man, it's crazy how there's only just a single pane of glass protecting Girl and Shell there. Like, he pointed out, it's like, there's really not much protecting that image there. Not only was it famous, but Reiji had a history with it too, though Muskie had been made privy to the details, admittedly. Oh. You recognize the name as the name of Shinzo Mamiya's recently discovered painting. However, that was where his familiarity with the subject ended. That seemed like the obvious play here. After all, this was sounding like defacement of property and theft. Muskie quickly hung up and immediately dialed Reiji's house. Reiji sounded rattled, much as he tried to hide it. That sounds like Stella. Should I take this as a sign of trust? Yeah. Though curious about who else Reiji was sending, Muskie decided the sooner he got to the museum, the better. I mean, I can't imagine he'd send anyone other than Toji, but... unless he also decided to bring in Yaginuma. But she already called the police, so probably not. Thus, he started to get ready, only to sigh when he spotted his unfinished laundry. Knowing the alternative was wearing wet clothes for days to come, Muskie put down his things and resumed drying. Muskie got off at Ueno Station and approached the museum to find it surrounded by squad cars and police officers. He didn't recognize any of them, nor was there any sign of Yaginuma. The museum proper appeared to have been cordoned off from the public. As such, Muskie knew he'd have to find Stella if he ever hoped to make his way inside. Unfortunately, he didn't see her anywhere. Now what? Wandering around here won't do me a whole lot of— Oi! The police officer on security detail abruptly interrupted his thoughts. Police officer cautiously scrutinized Muskie's face one last time before disappearing into the museum, leaving the detective's assistant all by himself. That said, the officer was only doing his job, so his dominating attitude hadn't rubbed Muskie the wrong way. Hold on. If he finds me that suspicious, is it really wise for him to just leave me here unsupervised? However, the officer came back just as Muskie had begun traveling down that train of thought. And with that, the officer beckoned Muskie into the museum. There was just as many officers present inside as out. They appeared to be busy dusting for fingerprints and footprints. Muskie hailed the blonde curator as soon as he found her. Stella gave him a blank stare. He had eyes in the back of his head. Muskie just knew he'd seen the officer who escorted him inside, tensing up. Fortunately, Stella had finally nodded with what was hopefully recognition. Muskie wondered if she'd somehow thought she'd been speaking to Reiji on the phone earlier, but ultimately decided it was best not to ask. Stella turned around and started for the heart of the museum.
こっちからの少女。
傷つけられたと言ってましたが、破られたのです。
Muskie voiced the biggest question on his mind as he trailed after Stella.
ガラスがあったから破けてはない。
Stella came to a halt. Looks as if someone had etched a massive spiderweb into the glass pane. Furthermore, it was fogged up, making it difficult to see the painting within. Muskie didn't know whether to consider that a blessing in disguise. Either way, he couldn't even begin to imagine what would have happened to Girl and Shell had the glass not shielded it. Just then, Muskie noticed a broken wooden chair on the ground. The forensics officer was examining it, searching for fingerprints, from what Muskie could tell.
椅子をぶつけたみたい。
そのようですね。
Glass was fogged in just a single spot, meaning it had likely only been hit once.
結構な音がしたんでしょうか。
わからない。昨日いた人たちは気づかなかったって。
これが割れた時に人がいたんですか。
昨日は臨時閉館で別の展示室で絵の入れ替えしてたから。
Stella gestured toward the entrance. If that was where the other exhibit hall was, then it was indeed a decent distance away.
ここには誰もいなかったんですか。
だから誰も見てない。作業してた人も変な人は覚えてないって。
So we're dealing with a no witness scenario then.
そういえば天罰の絵もなくなったと言って。
こっち。
Stella suddenly took Muskie by the hand and dragged him off. Eventually, she stopped at a door in the corner of the exhibit hall.
ここの中にしまってた。
収蔵室ですか。
物置。鑑定とか事件とかあったからいつでも確認できるようにって。
入ってもいいんですか。
多分。
Yeah, probably. Stella opened the door without missing a beat, not even bothering to check with her superiors first. An officer was there inspecting the scene. He cast a suspicious glance toward the newcomers as soon as he noticed them.
その辺触っちゃダメだって。
犯人の指紋が残されている可能性がありますからね。
そこの扉から外に行けるし。
Stella pointed to the door the forensics officer was so diligently inspecting. The words emergency exit loomed above it.
いつも鍵かけてるけど盗まれたのに気づいてから確認したら開いてたって。
外は美術館の裏手みたいですね。
Unfortunately, that also significantly diminished the chances of there being any witnesses, given how deserted that area was.
盗まれたのは天罰だけですか。
他の絵は収蔵庫にしまってある。
それだと天罰を狙ったという可能性は高いですね。
It was hard to see why, considering it was a newly discovered painting from a recently deceased artist. Though that said,
転売もできないと思いますがね。
どうして？
she still looked curious.
有名すぎるからですよ。新聞などで発表もされていますし、手に入れてもどうすることもできませんから。
After all, no one would be stupid enough to buy stolen goods that only paint a neon target on their back.
探偵みたい。
ただの見習いですよ。
Muskie shrugged. There was one thing he had over his boss, is that he was more well versed in the world of art. So no one could argue that he actually was the right man for this case.
わからないのは、空の少女に椅子をぶつけた理由です。絵を盗むだけなら、あんなことをする必要はありませんから。
That's an interesting question. So they have this obsession with Exile of Paradise, but also they have like some sort of resentment tied to Girl and Shell. Interesting. Still, his shoulders slumped. The culprit had snuck in through the back door with the express intent of stealing the painting. It made no sense why they would go all the way to the exhibit room and vandalize Girl and Shell when they knew that had upped their odds of getting caught.
心臓嫌いだった？
どうでしょうか。それならば天罰も持ち帰ったりはしないような。
The question of why the culprit had done something that only served to complicate the robbery was clearly turning into the central mystery of this case.
犯人わかった？
いや無理ですよ。
Honestly, Muskie believed the police would do better at digging up clues than a novice like him.
レイジならすぐ見つけるのに。
I don't think so, Stella.
時坂さんだって無理だと思いますよ。
Suddenly, the conversation was interrupted by the officer who escorted Masuki in earlier.
失礼します。また面会の方がやってきましたが。
誰？
おそらく時坂さんが言っていた援軍。
うん。来てもらってください。
The officer went back the way he came.
誰？
自分も知りませんよ。でもおそらくあの人だと思うんですが。
I think I do, but I
そ
could
う
be
なん
wrong.
だ。
Wonder if the two of them have ever met. Shortly thereafter, Masuki found that his suspicions had been right on the money regarding the identity of his backup.
待たせたな。
Yup. Kept you waiting, huh?
わざわざすみません、青木さん。
まったくだ。結局絵を見られないままになったとはな。いや、
It's
こっ
true.
ちの話だ。
I forgot. Told you wanted to see the painting. The first time they came here, Stella wasn't here, so they didn't have an in, and now I got stolen. She's like, motherfucker, didn't even get to see the fucking paint. I mean, yeah, whatever. Professionalism, yeah, fucking whatever. Told you mumbled and grumbled.
誰？
ジャーナリストの青木浩二だ。時坂の知り合いでな。
そう。
Oh. Still accepted that terse explanation without further question.
さて、状況を聞かせてくれないか。
Masuki nodded and gave her an abridged summary of the incident.
まるでちぐはぐだな。
Toji heaved a sigh.
天罰の所在を最後に確認したのはいつだ？
多分土曜日。レイジが帰ってから一度見に行った。
日曜日は？
Stella shook her head.
わかんない。ここにあったままだと思う。
待ってください。侵入されたのは昨日。
展示室の絵のガラスにひびが入ったのは昨日だろうな。だが、絵が盗まれたのはその時だとは限らないんじゃないか。
True. See, and that's what I was starting to think. Was it two separate incidents? That's what I was thinking. Like, is Sasakura like obviously I have suspicions of both Chie and Sasakura. Maybe they're both doing shit, but separate of each other, right? For a while I thought maybe they're in cahoots, but like maybe Sasakura has his own agenda, Chie has her own agenda, and they're both acting independently of each other, right? And that's how this incident came to pass. So like part of me was like, because we know when the painting was first revealed, there was the man who like the old man that stared daggers into the painting, right? He looked at the painting and he was so pissed off at it. But then there was also the woman in the coat who went storming out of the museum. Now, could they have been in cahoots? Maybe, but was it just, could have been two individually separate reactions to seeing that painting? Yeah. One got really pissed off, one felt some other kind of emotion and ran out, right? So now, one, who I presume to be the killer, took the painting, you know, probably saw that figured it was an easy time to get at it, whenever that was. One nabbed the painting whenever, and so that way they'd have, you know, the reference right there for them to accurately recreate it. Meanwhile, now, a day later or so, or a couple days later, this guy comes back to the museum, sees an opportunity to fucking do something to the girl in shell painting, and does it.
それは確かに。ちぐはぐだったのもそれならば納得はできますが。
無論根拠はないがな。おいそこの指紋は取れたか？
Toji addressed the officer examining the back door.
あ、それが見つからないんです。おそらく手袋をはめた手で最近握られたようでして。
それが犯人だとしたら用意周到だな。
いや、待ってください。美術館の職員だったら。
Masuki knew from experience that Stella's white gloves weren't simply a fashion statement.
収蔵品を汚したらいけないから。
ならば職員が持ち出した可能。
わからない。でもそんなことする人はいない。
Stella shook her head.
そちらの可能性は警察に任せましょう。まだ集まっている情報は少ないですが。
いいだろう。
The three of them left the storeroom and reconvened by Girl in
まず
Shell.
はこの空の少女が傷つけられた理由です。天罰と切り離して考えてみましょう。
心臓嫌いだった。
Still partially the same hypothesis as earlier.
もしくはこの空の少女そのものが憎いという可能性もある。最有力の被疑者は檻の中だが。
Took a second for Masuki to realize she was referring to Makoto Orokushiki. Which one sounds more like the truth? Yeah, I don't think it's against Mamiya. I don't think that is the case. I think Toji is onto something with its... But that's the thing, sometimes Stella, she just spits random shit out and she right. This one's going back to the choice saves. Put that shit back day. I don't know. Me personally, like, this is my thought. It's something with the painting itself. And they saw an opportunity and they took it, right? Okay, well that... Because that's the thing, this whole time I've been talking about the old man who looked at the painting and got pissed off. That was during Exile of Paradise's showing in the museum. That, as far as we know, that had nothing to do with Girl and Shell. So it could go back to something to do with Mamiya. That is possible. He saw Exile of Paradise and it pissed him off. But then also attacked Girl and Shell. This is a tough one, actually. I'm not 100% certain on either choice, because I could see it being either or. Maybe it was another thief. Someone else had come to try to get Exile of Paradise, and out of anger they attacked Girl and Shell. Mayhaps. So it could be neither of those options. What do I want to go with here? Let's think about it. Let's think about it. So, I strongly believe that the person who attacked the painting, the person, whoever this is, right, who has the grudge, is Sasakura. Do I believe he's the killer? Not necessarily, but I do believe he's the one who would have vandalized the painting. He's the one who got very angry looking at Exile in Paradise. I think it would have been him. But would his issue be with Mamiya? Or would his issue be with the painting itself? Because maybe he came to destroy Exile Paradise. Not just steal it, but to destroy it. And then tried to settle for Girl and Shell. Threw the chair at it, realized, oh wow, that didn't do much. I just cracked the glass. I better get the fuck out of here. Oh, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And yeah, Masuki doesn't have notes. Damn. I don't think it's something against Girl and Shell. I don't think it's something against Girl and Shell. Right, because there was something about being betrayed. There was something about being betrayed, right? When he saw whoever this person was, because we saw like the one perspective where they talked about like they had been betrayed, but they would never betray someone in response. So maybe they saw Exile in Paradise, right? And they felt betrayed for some reason that we don't know by Mamiya, right? So seeing Exile in Paradise is what triggered this anger towards Mamiya, right? I'm thinking that's the case. I'm thinking it is a grudge against Mamiya. Somehow they have some connection to Exile in Paradise, and it was like something that should have never gone public. And honestly, maybe they could, if it is something that's tied to Sei, like I think it is, or Sei, I think it's S-E-I, Sei, I think it's Sei. If it was connected to Sei, in the way I think it is, maybe Sasakura knew about this and was hoping that would never come to fruition, right? He was hoping Exile in Paradise would never be released. He had some kind of investment into it. And that's why when he actually saw it, he was made angry by it. I think that's the case. Because that's the thing. If it were just Girl and Shell has been out for a while. We know that. It's been out for years. It's been a part of this museum for years. If he truly had an issue with Girl and Shell, you would have imagined over the years he would have found another opportunity to do something like this. But I think just recently, a grudge against Mamiya has been sparked because of Exile in Paradise's release to the public. I think that is the case. So I'm gonna go with a Mamiya grudge.
間宮心臓への恨みがあり、彼が亡くなったことにより復讐が果たせなくなり、彼の代表作でもあるこの絵を傷つけようとした。
Not quite my thinking of it, but okay. It's implausible if nothing else.
心臓の絵で今も普通に見られるのはこれだけ。
そうかもしれません。
あとはもちろん単なる愉快犯だというのもあり得るぞ。
Told you chimed in. Okay, well, see, that's fair. I was about to say, like, no one's gonna mention the guy, but I'm like, Reiji's the only one who knows. Well, Stella knows, because that's how Reiji found out, but Reiji's the only one in the squad that actually knows about the angry old man. So he might be able to, piece things together, but these two wouldn't have that piece of evidence to do that.
それもわかるんですが、わざわざこんなところに入ってやりますかね。何も得るものがないと思いますが。
That's why she said nutcase.
バカをやる連中はいつの時代もいるからな。
Doji heaved a sigh.
いずれにせよ、やった本人に聞かなければ真実はわからないな。
では、天罰の絵を盗んだ理由を考えてみましょうか。
心臓の絵を集めてた？
I think that's gonna be something connected to the current killings.
もしくは価値のある絵
If
だ
I
ろ
get
う
an
が
option to select a choice
売
here.
り払って利益にするか。
Which of those sounds more plausible? I definitely don't think it's because they wanted to pawn it off. I definitely don't think that's the case. Now it could. The theft of the painting could be something, could be an absolute red herring. It definitely could. Some guy saw it as an easy opportunity to pawn it off. It was just like, yo, they left the back door unlocked. I'ma sneak in, grab that shit, sell it for mad cash. This is possible. Because I don't necessarily think they're a collector. What I think is that I think they took it so they'd have the reference with them to make their creations, right? But I definitely could see the theft of it being an absolute red herring. And that it was someone who just wanted to pawn it off. That's an interesting one. That is also an interesting one. I'll still save, but I'm pretty confident in my decision on this one. I think of the two, I don't think it's because they wanted to pawn it off, but I think that's definitely a viable option.
収集家というのはありえそうですね。
As Masuki had mentioned earlier, pawning off a painting as new and famous as Exile of Paradise would essentially be suicide. He did say that. But there is a possibility that some thieves wouldn't realize that. With that in mind, it is more likely the thief had been aware of that and stolen it anyway to add to their collection.
そうなると、ここで証拠が見つからない限り、
そうですね。
All I could do was hope the forensics officers turned up something.
どちらにせよ、絵の所在を明らかにするには、犯人の身柄を確保せねばならないということだな。
そうなんですよね。
Which brings us to the ultimate question. Who did it?
自分から切り離して考えてみましょうと言っておいてなんですが、この犯人は同一人物なんでしょうかね。
考察する以上、 そこに
Also
戻るの
true.
は仕方ないことだ。
It's true that they could have noticed the door was unlocked and then taken advantage of that at a later time as well. They waited for a time for the door to be unlocked, sneak in and grab the painting, and then also the same thing to attack Girl and Shell. Very possible. I'm still of the mind it was different people.
やはり別件として考える方がいいんでしょうか。複数犯で一人は絵を盗み、
そういう連中がつるむというのも不自然ではあるが。
Doji nodded.
犯行時間にズレがあるかもしれませんからね。
That was something they could only hope further investigation would unravel, though.
あと一つ、
Doji suddenly chimed in with that.
何ですか？
天罰が盗まれた件。
Yes,
今起こっている
very
見
much
立て殺人
so.
との関連はないのだろうか。
自分はそちらの件について詳しくないので、
Or if I had to guess, yes, very relevant.
やはり関連はあるんじゃないかと思います。それが加害者によるものかは分か
I
りま
believe
せ
they
ん
do share a culprit, and I believe it's incredibly relevant.
そう考えるのが自然だろうな。見立てについては公表されていないから関係者か。
理由は何でしょうか？
So they could have the reference.
証拠品の隠滅か何かだろうが。
No, it's not even to hide evidence.
時坂に聞いた方がいいか
I
もしれない
genuinely believe it's because after they made the second one, they realized there were inconsistencies, so they stole the painting so that they'd have the reference there with them. Because you can't just buy like, you know, a print of this painting because it's a one of a kind, right? Like Girl and Shell is a popular painting that was like, I think they said it was like in textbooks, or like you could buy it, or like I think at one point Reiji was given like, or some character was given like a little like postcard sized print of it, like a little postcard of it that has the painting on it. So like with Girl and Shell, you don't need the original to be able to see a reference of it. But with Exile of Paradise, there are no reproductions. There's no prints, there's no postcards, no posters, no nothing. There's just the one of a kind Exile in Paradise. So it would make sense that they would have to go to this length to steal it so they could have that reference with them at all times.
そうですね。
The officer who escorted Masuki and Toji earlier suddenly approached, interrupting their conversation.
失礼。職員の方にもう一度お話が聞きたいとのことです。
職員？
Stella cocked her head and looked at Masuki.
間違いなくあなたのことだと思いますが。
それじゃ。
Curator? Which one of you is that? It's you. Oh, alright. Stella gave a little wave before following the police officer.
これ以上ここにいても仕方ないな。
そうですね。
Masuki and Toji left the museum and headed over to Ueno Station.
しかし、あのキザな警視殿がいないだけで、こうも面倒になるとはな。
Masuki had to guess she was probably specifically griping about how the officers on site had shared so little information with them.
あの人も忙しそうですからね。
いや、総一はそもそも強行犯捜査が主だからな。盗難などは確か捜査参加だったはずだ。
そういえば、時坂さんも殺人事件専門とか言ってましたね。
Perhaps that's why Reiji had assigned this case to Masuki.
あの絵は修復できそうなのか。
空の少女ですか？どうでしょう。どのように傷ついたのか見ていませんからね。
Such as, say, Maizono had been in life. Those scenario offered an intriguing question, though. Would the emotions Shinzo Mamiya poured into the painting remain, even if its appearance was successfully reproduced? Ooh. Now therein lies a question. Maybe it was the same culprit. Maybe it's someone, one of Sei's students, right? Who want an opportunity to flex their skills, right? So if they say, I trained under this master art restorer, give me the opportunity, almost makes sense why they would go to vandalize a painting. To give them that opportunity to prove themselves, right? To show that they're a proper successor to their mentor. I could see that. I could see that. Toji glanced at the storefront of a nearby bookstore.
なんだこれは。
Is it another goddamn what's the name? Shin Katsuragi book? Muskie could hear Toji fighting back a surge of rage. Turned to find that she was glaring at a pile of weekly periodicals stacked in front of the store. Curious, he picked up one of them.
連続猟奇殺人両腕をもがれた死体の意味とは
間違いないだろうな。
Okay, so the details of the serial killings got leaked. Muskie skimmed through the magazine. The story was clearly about the murders that had begun nearly a week and a half ago. While it didn't mention Seimazono's name, the details of the bodies and how they'd looked upon discovery were almost perfectly accurate.
どこかから情報が漏れたか。
An irate Toji checked the name of the publisher.
あまり知らない出版社だな。
After nodding to herself, Toji took 2 copies.
お前の分も時坂に知らせておいた方がいいだろうから。
そうですね
Muskie produced his wallet. Probably make the investigation all the more difficult now that this was public knowledge. At the very least, there had likely been several details only the culprit had been privy to that didn't mean a thing anymore. In the worst case scenario, it could even inspire copycat crimes.
では自分はこれから時坂さんのところへ向かいます。
ああ、出版元などについてはこちらに任せておいてくれ。
Alright, good work, team. Oh, hell yeah, we're back to the hospital. Though I'd left the case to Muskie, I still couldn't ignore the fact that Girl and Shell had been vandalized, much as I told myself it didn't matter. Oh, Reiji's going to... Oh, is Reiji getting therapy today? Thus, I found myself unconsciously stopping by Kichiki Hospital during my investigations. It had absolutely nothing to do with my current case, though. Furthermore, it wouldn't make sense to inform them of what transpired either. Why am I even here? I answered despite remaining at a total loss for an answer. There was hardly anyone around. The sign the hospital must have stopped seeing patients for the day. Then why the fuck are you here? And yet the nurses were still rushing about in a hurry. That was not a good time, huh? But just as I was turning to leave...
時坂さん
Chizuru? A familiar voice brought me to a halt.
こちらにいらしていたんですか、
Yeah.
朽木さん。
Swiveled back her way after a moment's hesitation.
ええ兄が体調を崩してしまって。
風邪ですか。
They did often say doctors tended to neglect their own health.
最近は体調管理もきちんとされていて。
Chizuru hung her head. Wow. You know, it's probably like he actually cared for y'all's adopted daughter, unlike you. So, you know, the stress of his job combined with the depression of, you know, finally having to acknowledge the truth that his daughter's dead probably weighs on him pretty fucking heavily, I'd wager.
お早い回復を祈っていますと。
Well, best to keep the news from them in that case.
ご丁寧にどうも。
Chizuru bowed and left the hospital. Hey, get out of here, cunt. Would have been too awkward to leave alongside her, so I decided to kill some time indoors first. Instead, I knew I couldn't bother the staff either, so I was left with little choice but to sit quietly in a corner of the waiting room. Yeah, there.
あら
Koharu? However, someone else hailed me shortly thereafter.
どうも、山之内先生。
Yeah, he's like, what are you doing here? I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. It was Koharu, poking her head out from the door next to me.
時坂さんどうかなさいましたか。
いや、特に何も。
そうですか。お時間があるのでしたらお茶でもと思ったのですが。
I subconsciously checked the clock. I wasn't exactly pressed for time, nor was she a stranger to the story of Girl and Shell, so that proposition actually sounded tempting.
お茶菓子もいただき物のカステラなのですがいかがですか。
What's with the sudden proposition all of a sudden, Koharu? All of a sudden it's like, oh, really at AG? I mean, you could always step into my office for tea and sponge cake. Now, if this had been any of the previous games, I'd assume y'all that was a proposition y'all want to make nasty, but you know, since third game doesn't play like that, I'm actually curious to see where this goes.
では、少しだけ。
Just to be clear, I definitely wasn't bought by the promise of sponge cake. Absolutely not. Hey, there's no shame in that, brother. How many times I gotta tell you this? I know it's the 50s, right? And you gotta make, yo, masculinity's very important to your image. I get it. There's no shame in it, brother. Especially not when it's a cute woman offering it, alright? No shame in that, brother. No shame. Any other man's gonna be like, ah, you tell another man, like, the cute girl offered me a sponge cake, how could I say no? He's gonna be like, amen. Amen.
空の少女の絵が破損。
Koharu stopped pouring her tea the moment she heard the news.
ええ、昨日のことだそうです。 こちらには朽木委員長をはじめあの絵に関わりがある方が多いので来てみたのですが。
朽木東子さんの実のお母様がモデルだったそうですね。
Correct. Gotta set a cup of green tea and a plate of sponge cake before me. Oh, that sounds delicious.
いただきます。
I wish I had sponge cake. Do I have sponge cake? I do have green tea. Do I have sponge cake? I might have sponge cake. I'll have to double check. Sponge cake was loaded with brown sugar at the bottom. Oh, that fucks. Exactly the way I love them. Yeah, see, that's the thing. If it weren't for the fact that Reiji hooked up with mentally ill teenagers, me and him were on. We have a lot of common, but like there's a very our Venn diagram, right? The circles are heavily overlapped, but there's that thin little sliver that isn't overlapped, where it's like something unique to him is like, oh yeah, mentally ill teenagers, love them. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, I prefer hot psychiatrists myself.
絵が傷つけられていたのはどういう意味があるのでしょうか。
Kahara furrowed her brow.
まだ詳細を確認していないので何とも言えませんが。
Took a moment to quench my thirst with a sip of tea before
から
continuing.
の少女そのものか。作者の間宮心臓に対して恨みを持つ者の犯行。
恨みですか。
I hate this specific background song because it has that little moment where like there's like the part where like the percussion like stutters a bit, and it's like that's how it would sound if my computer was about to crash. The audio would just start going and like every time it fucking happens. I like fucking lock in like don't. Oh, it's just the song. Okay, that's the second time it's happened now, and it fucking don't play with me like that.
もちろんただの愉快犯だということだって考えられます。いや、もう一点。
Contemplated the case as I discussed it with Kahara. Exile of Paradise. Okay, Exile of Paradise. I kept saying exile in paradise, which I guess wouldn't make sense. You don't get exiled in something, you get exiled out of something. Whatever. Shinzo Mamiya's final painting to the world had vanished. If I assume that both crimes were the work of the same person, and they probably were, maybe vandalizing Girl and Shell was done to distract everyone from their actual goal, stealing Exile of Paradise. In fact, that theory made more sense than anything else. What else would they have to gain from damaging Girl and Shell after all?
絵画を傷つけて利益が得られるものはど
Kahara broke their silence when she finished listening to my musings.
それこそ恨みを持つ人物による犯行が考えられるでしょうね。
Unless they themselves were an art restorer who wanted to prove their metal, who wanted to have an opportunity at something big. Or maybe they were someone who was actually a fan of Shinzo Mamiya and they wanted to prove that they could fucking work in the same way he could, so they give him the opportunity. So they created an opportunity for themselves, which is possible. However, both of them were dead. That said, this was Girl and Shell we were talking about, so it wouldn't have surprised me if someone had a deep-seated loathing for the painting itself.
もっと純粋に利益がある。金が稼げる行為だったとするならば。
いろいろと考えられるのですね。
まあ調査もまだなので、文字通り茶飲み話のたわごとでしかありませんがね。
I shrugged, stuffed my cheeks with the leftover sponge cake and got up.
どうもごちそうになりました。
いえ、お構いなく。またいらしてくださいね。あ、もちろんお怪我などではなく。
Feel free to come back anytime, as long as you're not giving me more work.
ええ、元気なうちにお邪魔しますよ。
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of surprised to see Kohara like acting like Kohara's always been. She always comes in clutch. She's always down to help out. But seeing her just act kind of friendly, because I know like towards the end of the Shell Part 2, she was kind of like, "What the fuck are you here for, Eiji? You need more assistance from us, huh? You need more of our help." God damn it. She was like always pissed at Reiji, like, what you keep coming in. Do you really need more from us? What more could we possibly give you? What the fuck, dude? She wasn't like quite that aggressive, but like it was very clear she got more and more irritated the more Reiji kept showing up. So now it's like Reiji shows up, he doesn't really have anything he needs for his case. She's like, tea and sponge cake? She's like, oh yes, well, let's have a nice little chat over tea and sponge cake. It's like, Damn, y'all's relationship really turned around. I went home after spending some time questioning locals in the area. The investigation wasn't going all that great, to put it lightly. While the police had been doing some sort of legwork, the same sort of legwork as me, they still didn't have so much as a suspect themselves. No, wait. There is someone. Keita Sasakura. He was the only one who'd popped up on our radars thus far. See, I feel like he is involved in some capacity. I don't think he's the main suspect. I don't. That was exactly why we had to tread carefully with this investigation. Though that said, his guilt was nothing but a possibility for the time being, at least without any cold hard evidence.
ただいま。
お邪魔しています。
It took me a moment to realize the sanctity of my living room had been desecrated by an invader. Masaki.
なんでお前がいるんだよ。
You said you could drink my tea. Well, you think you own the place now or something?
いや、時坂さんに用事があったんですよ。
そりゃ用があるのは俺に対してしかないよな。
You wouldn't dare have business of anyone else in this house, would you, you motherfucker? Took off my coat and left it on the hanger.
何をツンケンなさっているのですか？
An exasperated Yukari emerged from the kitchen.
いや、なんでもない。
Nothing at all, sweet baby sister. Such a pleasure to see you again.
はい、お帰りなさいませ。
そうだな。頼むわ。
I took a seat on the sofa once I was sure Yukari was out of earshot.
で、どうだった？
I kicked things off, figuring he was here to give me an update about the incidents at the museum.
あ、その前にこれ見ましたか？
Muskie showed me a magazine he'd been holding on to.
どこかから漏れたようだな。
そもそも自分だって事件内容をあまり知らされていないんですが、あ、天罰については書いていないようでした。
この雑誌の発売は今日か。
It was hard to tell since there was typically a 2-week discrepancy between the date a weekly periodical was released and the actual issue number.
買うときに店に確認したらそうだと言ってました。
Guess that means it couldn't have inspired the painting's theft then. I flipped through the pages. The article utilized a simplified drawing to illustrate how the bodies had looked. But simplified though it may have been, it was still quite clearly a grotesque corpse had been relieved of its
被
arms.
害者の名前もないし、勝手に犯人を作り上げているわけでもないから。
いいんですか？犯人だけが知り得る情報だって載っているでしょうに。
決定的な要素が抜けているんだよ。
And that was the wings on the victims' backs. That was the aspect that so specifically evoked Exile of Paradise. Thus, even if this did inspire copycat killings, none of them would include the wings in theory.
捜査情報なんてのはどうやっても漏れるものだからな。今回は最小限だから、おそらく周囲を取材して記事にしたんじゃないか。
問題視する必要はないんですか？
調べるのは別に構わないがな。
Personally, I doubted she'd find anything substantial, though.
お待たせしました。
You could have came over with tea just then.
あ、悪いな。
I set the magazine aside and grabbed a teacup.
まさきさんもどうぞ。
すみません、いただきます。
Husky bowed.
最初の件はどうだった？
However, Yukari chimed in for a change just as I was trying to steer us back to the matter at hand.
兄さん、お夕飯はどうなさいますか？
ああ、好きにしてくれ。
まさきさんは何がよろしいですか？
何でもいいですけど。
お前な、そういうのが一番困るんだぞ。
Wait, what did he say? Anything's fine? Reggie says whatever you feel like making. He says anything's fine. What's the difference?
今時坂さんも同じこと言ったじゃないですか。
Yeah, I was
で
gonna
は
say, I'm
皆
like,
さんで召し
did
上
you
が
not
れるよ
just say the
うお
same
鍋
thing?
にしますね。
Yukari chuckled and returned to the kitchen.
たく。で、
はい。美術館のことですよね。
And so, Muskie briefed me on what he turned up.
盗難されたのは天罰の絵のみで、空の少女には椅子がぶつけられた。
That must have been definitely damaged the painting, glass cover or not.
どう思いますか？
どうもこうも。犯人の意図がつかめないな。
That still didn't explain why they'd vandalized Girl in Shell. Sure, it was a work of art that drove people mad. Many lives have been ruined thanks to it, both the painting and the statue that inspired the former. But the problem was that out of all those lives, I was about the only one suspect capable of the crime. At least in my mind, anyway. Would I ever go so far as to vandalize that painting? Could something possibly drive me to smash it with a chair? Could imagine that vandalizing the painting had been the culprit's prime objective. That raised the question, had the crime been an impulsive act? Had they snuck in to steal Exile of Paradise only to go mad after seeing Girl and Shell? Oh. Now see, there's a possibility I hadn't considered. They were there just to get Exile of Paradise, but they saw Girl and Shell and it pissed them off, so they threw the chair. Honestly, kind of cooking there, Eiji.
時坂さん。
まあ、なんだ。
It seemed I'd been lost deeper in my thoughts than I'd realized.
転売目的と言ってましたけど、あれだけ有名な絵画だとほぼ不可能ですよ。
国内ならばな。海外のオークションなんかでは盗難品が出品されることもままある。
確かにそういうところはあるようですが、いくらなんでも税関を抜けるのは無理じゃないですか。
通関せずに国外に出る方法はいくらでもあるさ。
いや、でもそうなると犯人が軍人ということになってしまうじゃん。
盗品を送るだけならば軍人の知り合いがいるというだけでもできるだろうさ。
Probably wasn't anywhere near that simple in practice.
今のところ絵は犯人が隠し持っているだろうな。被疑者が上がれば踏み込んで調べられるが、
無茶なこと考えますね。
令状がなければ動けないやつにはできないだろ。
I joked, of course, but I also knew we still weren't in any position to be doing that for the time being.
そちらの事件との関わりはありそうですか？
ないと考えたいな。
犯人が盗んだとかは？
こっちの犯人がか。
If the murderer really was obsessed with Exile of Paradise, would they want to get their hands on the real deal as well?
危ない橋を渡ることはないと思うがな。
Oh? Assuming they had some remaining approximation of sanity anyway. Well, that's a big assumption. Still, nothing was out of the question when dealing with the perpetrator of such a demented case, and one so artistically inclined at that. And again, yeah, that was just bias talking.
しばらくは分けて調べることにしよう。柳沼には盗難についての情報がないか聞いておく。
わかりました。空の少女の方はどうしますか？
どうしようもねえよ。盗難と同一犯と考えておくくらいしか今はできないだろう。
The vandal needed to be found eventually. Their crime was absolute petty compared to homicide and theft.
絵の傷は治せるんだろ？
傷の程度にもよりますし、完全に元通りというわけにはいかないでしょうが。
はあ、大した技術だな。
Sure was ironic when considering the painting's model had been an art restorer herself. Uh-huh.
そろそ
Go
ろお夕
on.
飯にしませんか？
Expound. Yukari emerged from the kitchen after the sun had set.
今日はタラのチリ鍋ですよ。
魚とは珍しいな。
お魚屋さんで安かったんです。
Yukari cleared the area around the table. Would have been nice if she hadn't thrown that magazine in with the newspapers, but I decided it wasn't worth griping about.